Good afternoon, everyone. We are from Group 10, and our topic is Lesson 11 Waiting for Service. After this section, you should understand first how to plan and manage the wait, second, how to make any wait for service as short and pleasant as possible, third, how to make any wait for service seem short and pleasant, fourth, how to plan for capacity shortages. Fifth, how to manage the guest's perception of the wait. Sixth, how to offset the wait's negative effects by managing the value of the experience provided to the guests. Seventh, how to use queuing theory to plan the wait. And eighth, how to simulate a wait. When the wait begins, the guest experience often starts off not with a wow but a wait. We all know that wala tayong patience when it comes to waiting. Sometimes it will begin at the entrance of the restaurant. Every time we arrive at your favorite restaurant, we just need to wait kasi madaming tao. Madaming tao because their service is nice. So, also the number of cars in the parking lot is hindi na mabilang. What makes that guests wait or leave can be anticipated and managed if waiting lines are understood. Since it's our favorite restaurant and there's no other eating places within the eyesight and we are exceedingly hungry and we don't know what other restaurants are available, so we should convince ourselves that we must eat in that restaurant because also the quality or the uniqueness that will probably pull into the parking lot or just walk inside and we don't have the choice to just wait in line. Why do guests wait? It's impossible to have enough capacity to handle peak demand periods of time without having the capacity remain empty during normal demand periods. The guests waiting believe that the quality of the experience will outweigh the cost to them for waiting. So for the customers who decide to wait rather than leave, I know for sure that the planners will also wait as short as pleasant as possible. No matter how good the restaurant meal is, they will still know that no matter what the customer begins to experience angry, distressed, or unhappy about having to wait service, then the customer experience will be much harder to meet. Managing the weight has two major components. First is to keep the weight as short as possible by planning for and building the appropriate capacity into the service facility to minimize the wait for the anticipated number of guests arriving at the anticipated rate. Second is ensure that the guests who are waiting have their psychological and physiological needs and expectations met while they wait. Capacity decision. A capacity decision results from careful study of expected demand pattern. So, whether one is trying to plan for how many reservations in this restaurant, it's still the need to make an accurate capacity estimate is the same. A capacity decision have a real impact on the ability of the organization to meet future demands for products and service. Planners would predict three factors. The three factors are how many people will arrive for the service, what rate they will arrive, or how long the service will take. Capacity design. Demand to capacity. Decrease the value of customer service experience by increasing the waiting time, while a restaurant with too little capacity will fail to meet guest expectations for prompt service without excessive waiting time and short waits. And a restaurant with too much capacity can also fail to meet guests' expectations, can also negatively affect perception of service quality. Capacity. In an ideal world, planners would be able to determine the exact capacity required to serve each guest at the moment when guests expect service. So each customer for this restaurant would arrive just when a table or an empty car was available to receive the desired experience. What to do? First is close the doors to further customers. This choice is highly undesirable. Second, add capacity. if high demand persists, because this alternative is usually expensive that organizations do not usually choose it unless they believe the high demand causing the waiting lines will continue. Third is manage demand. Encourage to use non-peak demand times, reservation early, bird specials, or discounts. Fourth, allow line to form and then manage the line by diverting customers. And then lastly, do nothing because they will just accept the fact that it will make customers unhappy with the wait and hope that they are not so unhappy that they leave and never to return. Design day. Decide which day of the year to consider when determining the design capacity of an attraction or facility. Trade off for both the guests and the facility, not ideal for either one, but satisfactory. Average time in queue. It is the average time of an unhappy guest against the cost of building capacity. Capacity day, a maximum numbers of customers allowed in the facility in a day or at one time, setting limit to keep the guests happy.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alkan Mekalo, and I will be tackling about queuing theory, managing the reality of the wait. So, first and foremost, let us first define what is queuing theory. Queuing theory is a branch of mathematics that studies how lines form, how they function, and why they malfunction. Queuing theory examines every component of waiting in line, including the arrival process, service process, numbers of servers, numbers of system places, and the numbers of customers, which might be people, data packets, cars, or anything else. As a branch of operations research, queuing theory can help inform business decisions on how to build more efficient and cost-effective workflow systems. It is also an operation management technique that is commonly used to determine and streamline staffing needs, scheduling, and an inventory in order to improve overall customer service. Queuing theory is also called as waiting line. So queuing theory or waiting lines has characteristics. All waiting lines have three characteristics that any model must include. First, the arrival patterns, the numbers of guests arriving and the manner in which they enter the waiting line. Queue management is easiest when customer arrivals can be scheduled through reservations. Even if arrivals cannot be strictly scheduled, they may be controlled. Charging extra at peak times and offering discounts during the off session would be examples of arrival control strategies. Second, the queue discipline and how the arriving guests are served. A queue discipline must be obvious and unfamiliar, or managers must find ways to carefully explain what are the rules and why they are fair. The guests themselves can usually be counted on to maintain the discipline of the first come, first served queue. If someone breaks into the line in front of you, queue etiquette requires you to object and those in line behind you to support you. The third one is the time for service, how long it takes to serve guests. The time boundaries of some service experiences can be carefully planned, like a flight from Boston to Atlanta, or a ride on a roller coaster car. But customers in most service settings vary, voluntarily and involuntarily, in the time it takes them to receive the service. The amount of time it takes to serve the different customers can be as unpredictable as the people themselves. If the waiting line model is to be an aid in managing the line, planners must take this variation into account. Waiting line theory can be applied to anything that waits in line for something to happen to it. There are also line types. Organizational planners must decide what line types will best meet customer needs and expectations. In the following discussion, channel refers to a server and phase refers to a step in the service experience once it is underway. The first one is a single channel, single phase queue, or also known as one server, one step. Customers come in, wait their turn, and have their hair cut in the single service phase. Indoor customers at some quick serve restaurants stand in any one of several single channel single face queues. The customer looks the lines over, chooses one, stands in it waiting for service, and eventually reaches the counter to begin the single service phase. In that phase, the counter person takes the order, assembles and delivers it, and collects the money. The second queue type is the single channel multi-phase queue. A drive-through is a typical example of a single channel multi-phase queue. A third type of queue is the multi-channel single-phase queue. Lines to check in at an airport are typically multi-channel single-phase queues. Another is the lines to check in at an airport are typically multi-channel and single-phase queues as well. The last type of waiting line is the multi-channel multi-phase queue. Most airports use this queue type for security screening where the line for the first phase checks passenger documents and the second screens people and carry-ons. There is also a final type of queue that is becoming increasingly popular, and it is the virtual queue or the line that isn't visible. Anna Raffaelli suggests that planners need to consider at least 4 factors when choosing a queue type for a given situation. 8 planners should select the queue that best provides customers with all the following. First is a sense of progress toward their goal or service experience. Second, a sense of control over what is happening. Third is activity. And fourth, a sense of fairness with how their wait was managed. And now let's proceed to managing the perception of the wait. Understanding what makes time fly while guests wait in line is a fundamental concern for planners seeking to improve the quality of the wait. Guestologists have found that time flies not only when they're having fun, but also under other circumstances. Hospitality planners must remember that everyone is different, and these differences will influence how people feel about waiting in line. How customers feel about the wait is at least as important as how long the wait is. First thing to consider is occupied time feels shorter than unoccupied time. So if you are busy doing something while you are waiting, the time seems to go by faster. Most line waits can be made more enjoyable and made to feel less lengthy if guests can be distracted or diverted in some way. Second is time spent waiting to begin the service experience will feel longer than time actually spent in the experience itself. Hospitality planners therefore try to find ways to minimize how long the wait feels. Theme parks and other entertainment attractions may offer pre-attraction features termed the pre-show. Third is that anxious waits feel longer than more relaxed waits. If people are afraid of what will happen to them once the service experience begins, the wait will seem longer. Fourth is waits of uncertain length feel longer than certain ones. Anyone who has been at an airport waiting on a flight that is delayed for an unknown reason will know that such a wait feels endless. Waiting without knowing when the delay will be over causes any wait to feel much longer. Let your guests know what to expect. A time estimate can help the customer set a mental clock to let time pass more quickly until the preset time is reached. Telling phone callers how many callers are ahead of them in the phone queue serves the same purpose. Fifth is unexplained waits feel longer than explained waits. When you don't know what is holding up the line or causing the delay, the wait will feel longer than if you know the reason. If traffic stops and your view ahead is blocked so you can't see why, the wait will feel longer. If service is delayed, customers want to know why. Effective managers of waits will tell them or provide a visual cue that can explain the wait. Sixth is unfair waits feel longer than fair ones. If customers feel that the queue discipline is consistently followed and fairly used, then the wait seems shorter than it does when people are allowed to get away with cutting in line, or people are served out of the apparent sequence of service order, violating the perceived queue discipline. Good organizations recognize this truth and manage their lines with this knowledge in mind. Seventh, solo waits feel longer than group waits. Waiting by yourself feels longer than waiting in a group of friends or even in a group you don't know. Planners recognizing this perceptual issue try to organize their lines in such a way that people are grouped with other people. Under this logic, a double line would feel shorter than a single line, and a line structure that encourages people to interact so they feel like members of a group feels shorter than one in which the people are allowed to stay inside their own personal and highly individual spaces. Planners can arrange the sitting and waiting room areas so as to promote interaction and a sense of being part of a group. Uncomfortable waits feel longer than comfortable ones as well. All hospitality organizations dread seeing guests queued up in the hot sun, rain, or other uncomfortable conditions. Finding a way to keep people comfortable in outdoor queues while they wait to enter an air-conditioned environment is a real managerial challenge. Obviously, such devices as paddle fans, awnings, and artificially created shade can be useful for making the wait feel more comfortable and less lengthy. Another is interesting waits are shorter than uninteresting ones. We have already said that occupied waits are shorter than unoccupied waits. This principle is true even if the activity in which one is occupied is only busy work. But if you are occupied in doing something interesting while you wait, the time will seem even shorter. Another is happy waits are shorter than sad ones. While this goes without saying in most situations, it is part of the perception of the waiting experience. Customers who are having fun, enjoying themselves, and feeling positive about the wait itself and the service experience to come will find the wait to be shorter than those who are unhappy, sullen, and or feeling negative about waiting. Planners need to think of ways to keep happy customers happy and make unhappy customers feel better about waiting. Using clowns is one way to turn unhappy children into happy ones. Professional comics warm up their audiences. The comics get them laughing during the wait to make sure that when the television cameras come on, the guests are ready to have fun and laugh. The emotional wait state. In all these waiting situations, and especially the last one, the customer's emotional state will significantly impact the wait for service. Waiting in line can be frustrating and boring. Organizations need to manage the wait to avoid losing customer satisfaction. Crowds and clientele. If the waiting line to be managed is large and diverse, then the typical customer drives the design of the line and the associated wait. While planners should consider individual differences as much as possible in designing and managing waits, the line for large crowds must be designed to accommodate what the average guest expects when entering the wait process. Next is the waits in contrast. In all these waiting situations, the contrast effect will also influence the perception of the wait. If a customer has just had a comfortable, totally explained, predictable wait, followed by a subsequent wait that is unpredictable, anxiety-producing, and of uncertain length, the second wait will seem longer than if a well-managed wait had not just occurred. Similarly, if a customer has just had a long wait, a short one will feel even shorter in contrast. If the guest has just been waiting where employees were friendly and all servers were busy, that wait will seem shorter than a wait in which employees pay minimal attention to guests and some are engaged in activities other than serving people in line.
Service value in the wait. So this is the more respect the client receives or expects from the service, the more patiently the client will wait. The second major procedure for overseeing the acknowledgement of the holdup is to oversee the perceived esteem of the gain for which the client is keeping up. since the client characterizes the esteem of administrations made. The technique can be implemented over a period of time. So before service, this service holding clients may be given data or even a few other benefits that will increase the esteem of the gain that convinced them to join the line in the first place. For example, a hotel can raise the perceived value of guest involvement by advertising guests waiting in line for a glass of sparkling water or a champagne, or they can be engaged in other activities. So, during service, this service is just like a various strategies may be used to enhance the benefit esteem to the client and as defined by the client over the customer's preferences while it is being delivered. The company would need to use these tactics in any situation, but the idea here is that if the value meets or exceeds expectations when the customer receives it, the wait was worthwhile, in addition to providing clients with information. So after service, this service is that the client's perceptions of the experience will sometimes change after the benefit, making them feel much better about taking the time to hold up on the benefit in the first place. Despite the fact that advertising is often used to attract the attention of potential customers, people who have already purchased services are far from conscious. To remain competitive, Honda dealers began calling customers after they had left the dealership to ask about consistency of other services. Managing waits in an imperfect world. So these are the managers in the hospitality industry face significant difficulties in planning and handling the waiting line. The service cannot be stored or inventoried, so planners must strike a balance between providing enough capacity to meet demand and having too much capacity that some of it remains idle for the majority of the time. In an ideal world, the flow of customers precisely matching the supply when one of the guests leaves. So these are the examples of the managing waits in an imperfect world. The ethics of the business. In general, people believe that first come, first serve is fair, and that people should not disrupt a line's order. However, exceptions are made from time to time. When are these exceptions appropriate? Imagine you're the manager of a fine dining restaurant, and several customers are waiting for tables to estimate a 45-minute. When do you think it's appropriate to let a newly arrived benefit skip line and be seated right away? So these are the examples of business ethics.
So that's it for our chapter. Thank you so much for listening.